So I'd like to welcome our next two presenters. We have Jonathan Young with Audubon Arkansas, and he will be joined by Carolyn Tedford, and they will be talking about Audubon's Native project. So Jonathan, go ahead and share your screen.
How's it going, everybody? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so yeah, my name is Jonathan Young. I'm the field projects manager with Audubon Arkansas, and I am here to talk about our Native Agriculture to Invigorate Ecosystems project. We've worked with a lot of the folks that you guys have talked or have heard from over the last day or two, and excited to share a little bit about our program and how it came about. Working, hang on. No? Move. Avanti. There we go. Whoop, too far. Computer's being a little slow today. Sorry about that. So, yes, Audubon Arkansas is working with volunteers to collect local genotype native warm season grasses, perennial forbs, from remnant prairies across the state. And the goal for this is to ultimately put farmers in the business of producing these local ecotype seeds for at-scale restoration projects in our natural areas, in private lands, on right-of-ways, programs like the ones you just heard about. It's a great spot for some of those field edges that need a little bit of love. You know, these seeds were historically what was in an area to begin with, and the idea is to put the local genetics back onto the local landscape at scale. And to do this, we've been working with primarily historically underserved farmers to produce these in either, standard row crop production or drip tape irrigated, vegetable style plots. With, our ultimate goal is to restore pollinators, bird habitat at scale, so that we can have, grassland birds and diversity well into the future, as well as the genetic diversity that was historically on the landscape being represented. The benefits of our program are kind of twofold in that, farmers get the on-farm ecological, biological benefits of native plants on their farm. So if you've got vegetables or, fruit crops, watermelons, any of that stuff, planting this, in the middle of your production and making money on the seed that you're producing on it while also getting the benefit of attracting the pollinators to pollinate your crops as well. So there's a lot of benefits to this production in addition to just, the monetary benefits of producing seed. Our project is funded through the NRCS. We've been funded through our 2501 grant for the last few years. We're currently just finishing up a SIG grant, a Conservation Innovation Grant, which is the first grant that we used to start doing the wildflower production since we transferred from grass, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We also have some state NRCS funding and partner funding through the Nature Conservancy, and currently funded through September of 2021. And most of the match for the grants is provided by our partners, Roundstone Native Seed, and our farmer partners through their work on their farms. So yeah, why are we producing seeds? So, grassland bird habitat restoration is the goal for Audubon. Grasslands are one of our most impacted habitat types in the United States. We've lost, especially in the Southeast, huge, almost uncalculable amounts of our grasslands have been converted for farming or put into residential areas or, urban areas. So, restoring that diversity back to the landscape is key to the long-term survival for grassland birds in the Southeast. And one of the problems we found with that is there was a lack of genetically appropriate seed sources for restoration in the state. So if somebody like, say, the Natural Heritage Commission wanted to do a expand a natural area. So say they had a natural area in eastern Arkansas and they wanted to expand a natural area, their only option was to either go and hand collect seed off an adjacent natural area or to import seed from another place. So say Kansas or Canada or Florida or wherever it's being produced. And when you do that, you lose that, genetic diversity that you had. So you have these genetics that were historically on the landscape, and you're bringing in new genetics that maybe not as well adapted. And also, as is the focus of all this, restoring pollinator habitat is key. Most of the birds on the landscape are going to eat insects in their as feeding their young. They need the protein, so we've got to do something to keep our pollinators on the landscape if we want to expect to have birds on our landscape. So this is just a graph of some of the long-term effects of habitat loss over this is like 40 years down through like 2010. You can see the green grasslands line there. You can see just how affected our grasslands have been over the years. So yeah, how do we do this? You heard me talk about hen collection. We have an incredible network of volunteers across the state that have helped us to go and procure these, seed materials from all over the state of Arkansas. We've got partnerships with so many of these folks that are on here: National Heritage Commission, Game and Fish Commission, the Nature Conservancy, all kinds of, and I'm certain that I'm going to forget some people, NRCS. I'm certain that I'm going to forget some people, and I'll apologize for that now. Brownstone Native Seed, OERI, all these folks have helped us go get native seed off the landscape using volunteers and allowing us to have access to their properties to collect the seed material for this project. Primarily, hand collection is our main focus for our wildflowers. Our grasses, we have to do it a little bit differently, though that's how we started out with our grasses as well, was hand collecting, which go pick 20 pounds of little blue stem seed. I dare you. So this is some of the areas that we've collected from. As you can see, we've got the state sort of broken up into what we kind of refer to as seed transfer zones. So these are areas that have been determined to be more than likely would have had, so essentially if you're collecting within, say, that yellow block there, anywhere in that yellow block would be suitable for planting anywhere else in that yellow block. So if we collected off of Flanagan Prairie or Parkway Place or Cherokee Prairie or Firestone Prairie, Camp Robinson, we can use it pretty much anywhere in that yellow block and be reasonably sure that the soils, the weather, all that stuff are going to be ideal for that ecotype of seed. So you can see we focused kind of on these 4 seed transfer zones: the Ozarks, the Arkansas River Valley, and Ouachita's sort of lumped together. The Blackland Prairies in southwest Arkansas, and then the Grand Prairie is sort of the heart of our Delta ecotype there. That's where a lot of the historic prairies and natural areas are located. And to give you an idea of, I talked about the scale of how much of the prairie we've lost. The Grand Prairie is an excellent example where we had, 450 plus thousand acres of prairie land out there, historically, and now we're down to about 400 acres. It's less than 0.1% of what was left. So that's pretty significant declines. We're literally going to postage stamp prairies to source this and trying to get it from as many sources as we can so that we can put it back on the landscape and have enough genetic diversity to put it back on the landscape in a meaningful way that it will support itself. So yeah, I talked about collection methods. Some of our other collection methods for the grasses specifically our flail vac harvester, which you can see there mounts to the front of a small Kubota tractor. It's basically a big street sweeper brush in a box. And Ms. Tedford if you're there, you can tell them all about this thing. You've been on it for the last week or two, collecting some of your crops. But it works for some forbs, but primarily for the grasses. That's what it was purchased for. Let's see here. So also we have our push combine, which we can use to collect certain things, but mostly is used in our production plots. And this is also Ms. Tedford's favorite piece of equipment. Isn't that right? Wasn't that what you were telling me yesterday? Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, we're here, and it's not one of my favorite pieces of equipment. It needs to be self-propelled.
It needs a motor. It needs a motor.
Yes, instead of manual.
So yeah, you can see it is made for small scale production, but it is for certain things leaps and bounds more efficient than hand harvesting. Especially if you've got a lot of something, 5 or 6 rows of something, you can do it in a couple hours with this. It may take you a few days picking it by hand. So some of the things we have in production, these are some of our production plots, and this is these come from several of our farms. We've got, let's see, Rudbeckia grandiflora there in the top right and the bottom left. That is in the Arkansas River Valley. We've got Echinacea pallida there. That picture, I believe, is actually from the Blackland prairies. Right there in the middle, we've got Liatris picosachia, which is off of Ms. Tedford's farm. And so are the other 3 pictures there on the bottom, Wingstem and Monarch fistulosa. And then you can see some of our, it's our if you plant it, they will come picture. You can see all the butterflies there on our Slender Mountain mint. That is on another farm in Northwest Arkansas. So yeah, we're primarily focused on, these are some of the species under cultivation. We're primarily focused on native warm season grasses. We've got kind of what we call big 4 switchgrass, big blue stem, little blue stem Indian grass. And then primarily focused on perennial wildflowers. Most of the things that we have at this point are summer to fall blooming, with a few spring things or earlier summer, spring things like your echinacea will come up a lot earlier. But it's one of the things we need to focus on and expand on is some of our bloom timing, so that we can have mixes that span that entire season for pollinators. And then, so how do we grow them? We've got 2 methods mainly. We've got our drip irrigated plastic mulch method, which is what we use for our wildflowers. And so that actually has got, if you don't know anything about it, it's got drip tape underneath plastic mulch, and you plant right through it with a water wheel planter. We plant about anywhere from 10 to 12,000 plugs per acre, 2 rows per bed on the plastic, and spacing varies depending on the plant, anywhere from 8 to 24 inches. And I told you we hand collected a lot of grass to start. This is how we actually started in the Grand Prairie to get enough local ecotype grass growing that we could harvest it and expand our production plots. We actually went out, hand collected something like 3 or 4 pounds of each one of these different species of big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian and switch, and Roundstone brought down a 2-row tobacco planter, and we spent 2 days plugging this grass in and getting it started. Then we were able to harvest that grass and use it to expand our production plots to get to the point we are now. Now we can actually do a lot more traditional seeding, either by drilling or broadcast. Harrow and roll is another, depending on where we're starting. A lot of times we'll drill if it's an old pasture that's been sprayed. We'll run the drill across that just to mainly to help avoid erosion and stop stirring up the weeds. But if it's ground that was maybe soybeans last year, some of that ground that was in red in that last production or that last presentation, we would go in and actually broadcast harrow and roll. Works just as well, and we've gotten great results with both. So if you remember those hand-plugged fields, If you look on the photo on the right at the tree line, way back there is where we started, hand plugging, and we got about 1.5 acres of each of the 3 species down there, and we've expanded that to multiple farms, and then on that particular farm, about 25 acres, once we got enough seed going that we could actually broadcast and fill in that acreage. So when we have these production plots, yeah, we can go pick it, we can go plant it on somebody's farm, but the whole idea is to get these farmers into sort of a self-sustaining relationship with this crop, right? So we want these folks to be able to grow, sell, make money, just like, we were talking about earlier, farming is a business, right? So we need something that is going to be financially viable as well as, beneficial to the environment and wildlife on our farms. It's all great, but if it costs a bunch of money to do, ultimately, unless there's somebody willing to just continually invest in it, it's going to peter out. You've got to have something that's self-sustaining. So that's the idea behind our projects. We get these folks going and get them in production and get them all the tools necessary, the relationships necessary with the seed companies, understanding of how to farm these things in the long term, so that, in 5 years, maybe I only call them once a year and ask them how it went versus, having to train them every year. These folks, we've had a lot of great farmers that have really picked this production up and run with it and been able to make it self-sustaining, which is the goal. So part of that is, building markets. And so where are we putting this seed, and how are we making sure that it gets back on the landscape, that sort of a thing. We're working with Roundstone Native Seed in Kentucky. And essentially what we do is we set the farmers up in sort of a co-op situation with them. When the farmers are growing the seed down here, they grow and harvest it, and then Audubon takes the seed over to Kentucky, where Roundstone clean certifies, sells it for the farmers. We then get a list of kind of what was produced year to year, and we will provide that list to our partners. And that then in turn allows them to put it back on restoration projects from the area that it came from. But ultimately, we have to make sure that we sell all this stuff every year so that the farmers are funded to keep going, and, the seed company is funded to keep going, so that this is not, something that just sits on the shelf for 10 years and never gets planted because we don't have a project. So ultimately, after, that list has gone out to, all of our partners and folks that may, need to do restoration, large-scale restoration within these, ultimately we'll go on to the open market, and this seed may wind up in right-of-way mixes in Arkansas or the Southeast generally. And generally we'll just add diversity back onto the landscape, even in those places that maybe it didn't come directly from that eco-region, but maybe it's going back in the Southeast, so it adds some more diversity instead of just having, one source or 2 sources for some of these seeds. All right. So we're also using our, our production plots and our farmers' efforts to raise awareness about native plants on our farm landscapes, their uses, their benefits. This is the Natural Areas Association meeting, was I think 2 years ago. We were the primary focus for that. We brought natural area managers from all over the Southeast and all over the country, really, I think, out to our farmers' production plots to show them what's going on, show them what we're doing here in Arkansas, and hopefully inspire them to do similar things where they're from. And I would be remiss without thanking my team, Audubon Arkansas, Dan, Uta, Rudy. They help me every year to get all this stuff together, get it on up to Roundstone for cleaning, and getting it back on the landscape for production. So at this time, I want to introduce Carolyn Tedford. She is one of our producers that has worked with us. Now, you're going into your 2nd year now, isn't that right?
Yes, this will be my 2nd year. This is my first harvest in January. The seeds will be going to Roundstone, which I'm excited about, and it'll be my first year to produce seeds. And it's been an adventure for the first year, a lot of anxiety, putting down the tape and the mulch and planting the seeds themselves, or not the seeds, but the plugs. A lot of learning in the process. It's been an adventure. I have aromatherapy all summer long with the bergamot that we planted. It's been very, very fun. And definitely would do it again. The pieces of equipment, I've learned how to use the full vac. I absolutely love that. The push combine, it's definitely, you need to take some weightlifting classes and have some weight to push behind it. But, and plus you're walking on your plants, and I was so babying my plants not to have anything happen to them, and then you take that push combine and you're walking all over your plants. But that's okay. I got my seeds in, and I've got bags and bags of seed. And the ironweed and the echinacea, the mountain mint. We did do some milkweed, which was awesome. And the reason why I felt it important, I retired from the military 4 years ago, and I wanted to do something to give back to our landscape. I inherited part of the family farm. It hadn't been worked in a long time. And so this was to make my farm produce in some way. And it's been beautiful that people stop by, and I can be busy doing something, and the neighbors want to know, what am I doing? What is going on out there? And you tell them that you're producing wildflowers for pollinators and to sell the seeds, so we can put those seeds back into our landscapes to help with the pollination of our crops, and also to help with stopping the invasive species. But I've enjoyed it very much so.
And so just to be clear, yeah, Carolyn sort of touched on some things there. She is a brand new farmer
Right.
who is, like I said, getting back to it from on a small family farm up near Wyman, east of Fayetteville. And she's a retired veteran, which qualifies her for our project. I didn't say, I'll go back a couple slides here. I didn't touch on all this here, but yeah, we're working primarily with minority farmers, armed service veteran farmers, new farmers, limited resource farmers, and all of them have to be EQIP eligible. The land and the farmer should be EQIP eligible to qualify for our program. And this is a map of sort of where everybody is located. We've got farms all over East Arkansas, which is where we primarily started this project. And then when we got the SIG grant, we expanded across the state. So we've got folks in the River Valley, the Ozarks, and Southwest Arkansas, and the Blacklands. This is sort of total acres under production across the state. So it's still fairly small scale, but we're getting some farmers now that are really, like Miss Tedford, who are really picking up the ball and running with this thing. We've been absolutely amazed at how engaged you are, Carolyn, and how excited you've been to implement the program on your farm. It's been an inspiration to me to keep going on this thing, and you've done an excellent job. And more proof that if you plant it, they'll come. I had to get a picture of a monarch in here in the bottom left corner, down there on your swamp milkweed. We have one row of swamp milkweed that we were able to get into production out there, and hopefully we'll have enough seed that we can produce some more next year and the next year.
Right. And I couldn't do all of this without my daughter, who's here with me today. And she helps tremendously with gathering the seed. There's the mountain mint and the echinacea are hand-picked. and the downy sunflower. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some. Oh, and the lianthus, which is very interesting to pick. We've been very innovative in the way we pick certain plants. We try one way to pick it and realize, well, let's try something else. And drying the seeds been very interesting. We have a very good learning curve.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what we try to provide to our farmers is guidance through all the technical stuff of seed production. Even our our very experienced farmers, very few of them are actually producing seed for production. So there's just a whole different set of things to learn about. Making sure that seed gets out of the field dry, doesn't mold, doesn't get too hot, doesn't, all that sort of stuff like you're talking about. There's a fairly steep learning curve. We like to work with our farmers as much as possible to help them get through all those things. And Roundstone is an invaluable resource when it comes to that. They if I don't know, they know, because they've been doing it for 25 years, the native plant stuff. And they've been great for helping us work through some of these technical foibles as we go along here. But yeah, and that's the other thing too. I'll just say about our farmers. Every farmer is very different in our program. We've got folks that have worked in the industry and farmed thousands of acres, and I have watermelon farmers, and I have brand new farmers, and I have everybody in between. So we've tried to work with anybody on an individual level to make sure that we're utilizing your equipment, your expertise, is your enthusiasm. In Carolyn's case, her enthusiasm has carried her through a lot of this. Figuring all this stuff out on her property. It's all a little bit different, and she's been a great asset up there and a great partner.
Thank you.
Carolyn, we got a chat here. Somebody was asking, what are some of the worst pest problems you've dealt with? Aphids on the milkweed, perhaps?
Yes, we had milkweed aphids on our milkweeds, and we tried spraying it off with just water and trying to not use any pesticides that would have an effect on the pollinators. And we tried insecticidal soap, and it didn't work as well. So next year we are going to come up with trying to induce something different. Ladybugs, there's a couple. What was the other one we came up with?
There's some assassin type of bugs. I forget the names of them exactly, but we got a catalog in the mail that lays out the different bugs that you can introduce to help fighting on those aphids. So I think that will be one thing that we're going to look into.
I'm seeing a question here about irrigation as well. I know our drip irrigation is very efficient.
Yes.
We're using very small 2-acre plots here to get started. And I really don't know of a much more efficient way to use water than drip irrigation. I'm sure maybe there is, but it's very efficient. And primarily the main irrigation is going to be during establishment, because most of these plants, I'm not saying you're never going to have to irrigate again. That's not what I'm saying, but you really have to irrigate fairly heavily only at the very beginning when you're trying to establish these plants, because they are perennial, and most of our perennial wildflowers are very deeply rooted. So once they're established, your irrigation is going to be less frequent as you go along.
Yeah.
Would you like to touch on irrigation? I know you've loved my irrigation system out there as well.
I have, it's supposed to be automatic, but for some reason or the other, it's high tech and I don't get the right buttons pushed. But I do it manually. I go out there and turn the water on and push the button, and it works. I haven't had any problems with having the tape being eaten by rodents or anything like that, which is, I've had one piece of tape that I had, the irrigation tape that I had to replace or put together. I had to put it back together with a connector, and that worked out great.
It's not that expensive though, right?
It's not that expensive.
We haven't used a lot of water.
No, when we first started out, I was expecting like an $800 water bill, and I have never reached over $300 for the 2 acres that we have. And, that's, for me, was a concern. It's been around, $300. That was my highest water bill, and that was when it was the hottest, July and August. And so far, last month, October, I had 171 bill, and at the beginning of the spring, it wasn't, my bill was like $71, which wasn't bad at all. And I had some erosion control when we first started out, so it was, I had lots of water, and it's been, I find that the irrigation has been absolutely wonderful to establish the native plants. And like Jonathan said, once they become established, they're more drought resistant than your other plants that you might want to grow.
Yeah, and yeah, to be clear, the main thing, once they're established, you still will have to irrigate, but it will be less because they're much deeper rooted, and irrigation then can be more focused on helping to support when the plants are blooming, those sorts of things, to support the seed production specifically, not necessarily the survival of the plants. Is that you're looking to increase yield with it, and so that's the main thing. The other thing it allows us to do with the drip irrigation is fertigation, so we can actually put in liquid fertilizer through the irrigation system itself, which makes it a lot easier. We actually, when we put these in, we do soil tests beforehand, and then we'll figure out what we need. We put some different granulated fertilizers underneath the plastic itself, so we're only putting fertilizer where we need it. And then also we did seed the middles on this one with a slow growing creeping fescue mix that actually worked out really well in Northwest Arkansas. It hasn't taken over the rows, really helped suppress the weed pressure in the middles, and it looks good too. Questions about cleaning? You can found that, or you want to talk about that, Carolyn?
This will be my first year, and what we have done so far is we've gone out and collected the seeds, either by using the push combine or the full vac, or hand picking it, and we dry it in the garage, a shop that we have. And I put out tarp on the bottom, and we lay it out, and then we turn it about once a day for about 2 weeks on the ironweed, for instance. And the liantras, we had that laid out for a couple of days because you're pulling the seed off of the stalk, and then you lay it out to allow the bugs to escape. And then I have it bagged up and ready for Jonathan to come and pick it up. And
which I'm doing this afternoon, by the way.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yes, we're getting our garage cleaned out.
Yeah, and I think each different type of flower, there's a different level of like cleaning. It's really just a matter of getting the seed head without disturbing or losing any of the seed from it out in the field. And each different, like the yellow crown beard, I think, is one that's really sensitive. So You're just out there like gently holding the head of the seed head and cutting it and putting it into, you know, your collection pouch or what have you. And then, for instance, the goldenrod, that's when we use the flail back. So you're just running a machine through it, and that does, I think, the majority of like the cleaning. It just separates the seed mainly, but what we're doing is sending like that raw collected product to Roundstone, and they've got all the equipment to do that seeding or cleaning for each of the different types of flowers.
Yeah, and to be clear, you know, the farmers are only responsible for getting it down to like sort of a manageable volume. That's their main focus. They want to keep the seed viable and get it down to a manageable volume. That's one of the services that Roundstone is providing. Is, you know, in that, you know, that co-op agreement, they're splitting, you know, when they sell that seed, they're splitting the cost, you know, they're splitting the profit on that with Roundstone essentially. And that's what, you know, Roundstone is providing, is all the seed cleaning. So they've got just buildings and buildings full of specialized equipment, people. They'll take this stuff by lot. So if, say, Carolyn sends, you know, Slender Mountain Mint, and then another Ozark farmer sends Slender Mountain Mint, all that stuff is kept cleaned and separated in lots so that it can, you know, be put back out later, you know, and sold, you know, everybody gets their what they produce. It's not just kind of all thrown in a hopper. We try to keep as much, everything separate as possible, so that we can track all that stuff back if there's an issue. Because that's the other thing too, you know, like when these guys harvest this stuff, they're trying to do it at the peak of when it's ready. They're gonna make sure it's ready for one, fully ready, and then two, they have to get it off the plant before, you know, it either falls off or the wind takes it. And so there's a balance there, and, you know, what they want to do is get it when you have the most viable seed in the bag. So, you know, when you're buying seed for any of your restorations, you're looking at that PLS, Pure Live Seed number. So I've had some of our farmers send me 2,000 pounds of switchgrass, and I find out later that it was in a grain hopper for 3 months and it's got 1% viability. You know, that was a hard lesson for that farmer. You know, they did all that work and then they didn't treat it right. And then on the backside, they wound up not making any money on it. So that's all things that we have to, you know, work with our farmers to make sure that they're doing correctly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan and Carolyn. And, you know, we've gotten a lot of great feedback in the chat box. There are a couple questions that you are more than welcome to answer in the chat box, and I can try and type up a summary to include with the video recording. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your expertise. And, you know, who knows, maybe we can host another webinar that has, you know, a longer explanation. And Carolyn, you can go into your experiences.